I am Holly Callanan. I'm the CEO here at GHAR, and I'm super excited about this presentation we have for you today. I am just simply here to say hello and welcome everybody, and I'm then going to introduce Alexa Caballo-Hughes, who I think most of you know is our president this year at GHAR, but if you don't, I'm going to hand it over to Alexa, and she's going to be able to introduce Bill to you, and I'm sure she has a few things that she wants to say in the first place. So thanks so much, Alexa. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Holly. So really excited to spend some time here with Bill. Again, my name is Alexa Caballo-Hughes, president of Greater Hartford Association of Realtors. So we have with us today Bill Dedman, one of the lead reporters on Newsday's undercover investigation of racial steering by real estate agents. He designed the hidden camera project called Long Island Divided, which showed agents reinforcing racial segregation through illegal steering of home buyers. The project has launched investigations by state and federal authorities and several steps by the National Association of Realtors to increase awareness of fair housing issues. Newsday's team received several national awards for their work, including a Peabody Award. Long Island Divided and its 40-minute documentary film, Testing the Divide, are online at newsday.com/divided. Bill is a Pulitzer Prize winning investigative reporter and #1 best-selling author of the biography Empty Mansions. He received the 1989 Pulitzer Prize in investigative reporting for his work at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on The Color of Money, his series on racial discrimination by home lenders in middle-income Black neighborhoods. The Color of Money led to expanded federal laws on disclosure of loan data, new financing for middle-income homebuyers, and greater awareness of systematic discrimination. He has spoken on fair housing and fair lending issues for the National Association of Realtors, the Federal Reserve, and many financial associations. Bill today is going to address for us how the tests of real estate agents were conducted, the major findings, what can agents do to ensure fair treatment of consumers, and what training and resources are available. And with that, welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Alexa. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of you spending time with me on a rainy day. Not a good day for pruning the lilacs, I'm afraid. I'm excited to have this opportunity to share with you the work by our Newsday team on fair housing. And thank you so much for inviting me. You know, it's surprising that real estate associations around the country have latched on to an investigation by a newspaper to prompt an important conversation in their associations. I'm hoping that together we can dive into looking at a few clips of our Newsday video of agents in action, perhaps not on their best days. And I'm hoping that we can talk about some of the difficult issues, like what agents can say about schools, about new training available, about some of the fixes and reforms that have been proposed, and how far they might really take us towards some change. My goal is for this session to be helpful to you, but also challenging, something for you to think about and to take action on.
Thank you, Bill. So Bill, you won the Pulitzer Prize for an investigation into mortgage lending practices. I thought it might be interesting for us to hear a brief summary of that investigation. And how does that investigation compare with this one?
Alexa, there are just a couple of connections to make. The stories in the Atlanta newspapers were called The Color of Money. They're online. They were about redlining, the practice of mortgage lenders, particularly banks, doing business on one part of the map but not another, or to put it another way, collecting deposits on all parts of the map, making loans on only some parts of the map. This was back in the late 1980s, and redlining had gotten a lot of attention earlier, but seemed to be thought of as something mostly from the past. That comes up again for us in a minute. We found that lenders, particularly in Atlanta, but in Milwaukee and other cities, were making home loans in white areas, even lower income white areas, but not in Black areas. Even the higher income areas that in Atlanta were home to Coretta Scott King and the vice presidents at Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines. A couple of points of connection to the current investigation. First, the customer would have no way to know where the banks didn't make loans. And the customer, therefore, would have no basis for making a complaint. The banks in Atlanta told us no one's ever complained about this. But we looked at how the banks operated. For example, we found differences in branch locations where branches had been closed, even though they had more money on deposit, and then opened in other places with less money on deposit. We found differences in which real estate agents the banks reached out to with their marketing. Even differences in where customers could put in a loan application. I think one lesson was how small actions, perhaps unintentional actions, maybe taken by even a lower level executive, could have a huge impact in creating or perpetuating a segregated system. I'd like to mention a more recent project for the Boston Globe, looking at traffic stops in Massachusetts. People stop for speeding. The series is called Speed Trap, and it's online. You know, an interesting thing about being stopped by an officer for speeding is that we were all speeding. And again, you have no way to know if you're being treated equally. If you get a ticket, did everyone going that speed get a ticket? If you get a break, if you get a warning that day, did everyone else going that speed get a warning? So it's similar to being a banking or a real estate customer. You don't know what listings are given to another real estate customer, and you would have no basis for a complaint. What we found was that in Massachusetts, who gets a ticket and who gets a warning is pretty easy to predict if you know the race, sex, and age of the driver. For example, women were much more often getting a warning, especially younger women. I interviewed a college student, she'd gotten 5 warnings in 6 weeks. But that break goes away at about age 40. It's the same as who gets roles in Hollywood. Minorities almost always got the ticket, especially younger Black and Latino men. So there seemed to be some difference, some racial profiling at work in that decision once someone's already stopped for speeding. Again, the customers wouldn't know, and importantly, maybe even the officers wouldn't know how it breaks down. Now, in those cases, public records gave us the picture of the result. We saw traffic tickets, we saw mortgage records. And then we had to look at how the institutions of power operated to see how that result happened. I think what's different about our project Long Island Divided is that we're not coming along later looking at the records. With the video cameras, we can watch people violating the fair housing laws. I also think it mattered that we're seeing specific agents, their faces, the names of their companies, the brands, and having that caught on video, I think increases the chances that it leads to some changes in the system.
No, that's true, Bill. And the Newsday investigation has truly become the most prominent example of the existence of race-based bias in real estate. Why did Newsday start the investigation in the beginning?
So let me set the scene. I doubt that any of you are unfamiliar with Long Island, stretching east of New York City with almost 3 million people in 2 counties. We say that it's one of the most heavily segregated suburbs in the nation. And what do we mean by that? We mean that there's a lot of diversity overall with people from all races and nationalities, but especially African Americans are concentrated in very few communities. Out of more than 200 communities and school districts on Long Island, a majority of the Black residents live in only 8. And we had heard stories, anecdotes from Black home buyers who had encountered problems when they tried to shop for a home outside of those few communities. And we'd heard this even from our own colleagues at the newspaper. So Newsday decided to follow the methods used by fair housing agencies and some government agencies from time to time, sending out testers with the addition of hidden cameras for video and for audio. Now, that's legal in New York, and it's legal in most states. Most state laws require only one person in the conversation, one party, and that person can be the tester, the home buyer, to consent to audio recording. But hidden audio recording is not allowed in about a dozen states, including Connecticut. But still, you can have testing everywhere. Testers can be debriefed after they meet with agents. And most importantly, we can make maps of the listings that they were given. Now, I'd like to show you an introductory clip from our documentary film. The project is called Long Island Divided. We called the film Testing the Divide. They're both online at the same address. We'll post it, simply newsday.com/divided. Now, what happened in this video clip surprised us, but we saw it over and over. One customer receives service from an agent, while another customer in the same circumstance, seeing the same agent, is refused service. Now, this will take just a second to get the video playing for you. Just a moment.
But you don't want to go there. It's a mixed neighborhood.
Mixed neighborhood.
If agents are courteous and professional, how can you know that they're treating you equally compared with someone of a different race or ethnicity?
I have to say it without saying it, you know.
Behind smiles and handshakes, how do you know if they're giving you fewer options or suggesting different areas?
I'm not going to send you anything you want to, unless you don't want to store your car to buy your friend.
Or that rules don't apply to you and another home buyer in the same way.
Yeah, okay, I definitely need that.
Long Island is one of America's most segregated suburbs. Newsday set out to discover what role real estate agents might play in keeping it that way, potentially affecting the quality of lives.
Technically, as a real estate agent, we shouldn't tell the buyers.
In house hunting, it's nearly impossible to see evidence of hidden discrimination. You would never know unless you go undercover.
In one test, Johnny Mae Alston was the black tester and Cindy Parry was the white tester. And they met with Anne-Marie Quealy-Bichon at Signature Premier Properties office in Cold Spring Harbor. They asked for the same thing. As often happens, the agent discussed getting pre-qualified or pre-approved for a mortgage by a bank, showing how much a buyer can spend on a house.
You pre-qualified, I asked. My husband's working with somebody in a bank. We've done some preliminary talks, you know, about getting pre-approved.
Neither had been pre-approved or pre-qualified. Here's what the agent told the black tester.
So I really need that. I won't take out any money unless you have a pre-qualification letter. So I need to. So that means I can't pre-qualify for a mortgage. Oh, so that means I can't go out to see anything. I won't do it. You can try another person, but I don't have the time.
And without pre-approval, here's what the agent told the white tester.
What is your availability? When can you start looking at houses? I would say not this coming week.
Cindy received 79 listings from this agent. Johnny Mae couldn't get any listings. And Cindy, the white tester, received 2 home tours. They had the same finances, the same budget, and they made the same request in the same area. But one was white, the other was black. The agent treated them differently.
Thank you for that, Bill. So if you may please give us a summary of the tests, who was tested and what was the outcome?
Yes, Alexa, it's First, I want to set up how we went about it. Our Newsday team focused on home sales only, so no rentals were involved in this test. And we send out first-time home buyers. We were testing only for race in these tests, and ethnicity. We didn't test for disability differences or same-sex couples or religion or other areas that we could have tested. We would send out a white home buyer and then an Asian home buyer, or white and then black, or white and then Hispanic. And we would mix up the order of who went to see the agent first. The home buyers gave the agent the same circumstances, the same constraints on their search. They were first-time home buyers, so selling another property was not involved. We chose testers of the same gender and roughly the same age. We dressed them in the same business casual style. We bought shirts for the men. I went shopping at Nordstrom for similar purses for the women. They had the same family size and they asked for the same number of bedrooms. And they were prepared to give the same income and same credit scores, but rarely were asked for any financial information other than mortgage pre-approval status, as you saw, on which they were the same. We shop for houses from entry level. Now, in New York City area prices, entry level is about $400,000 to the high end, $7 million. There are more expensive homes. $7 million won't get you Alec Baldwin's house in the Hamptons, but it will get you into his neighborhood. But it was always the same price range for both testers. And they saw the same agent. Now that wouldn't be necessary for an investigation by a government agency or a fair housing lawsuit by individuals. Under the law, a brokerage is responsible for having two different agents treat customers equally. But we thought it would be more fair and more persuasive to have the same agent see both customers. How did we pick the agents? We didn't. The brokerages picked which agents would be tested, though they didn't know it. Whoever was on the board to handle walk-ins or phone calls, that was the agent. We did 86 of these paired tests at 12 companies, 12 brands that together represent more than half of the sellers in our market. Familiar names: Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, Century 21, Remax, as well as larger regional brands like Douglas Elliman and Corcoran and some smaller regional brands as well. Our team then reviewed more than 200 hours of videos to see how the customers were treated and mapped the thousands of listings they had been given to see what school districts and communities they had been directed to. We did not feel comfortable being the referees, so we had two fair housing experts review each test for equal treatment. One had run a testing program for the Department of Justice, and the other is the law professor who wrote the textbook on fair housing law. Only if both of the referees independently threw a flag did we then call an agent out of bounds. Before we published, our team gave the agents and the brokers details so they could watch the videos and respond to our findings. So this was a careful effort. It took more than 3 years. This was not a drive-by investigation. Now, the results. The agents gave unequal treatment in 40% of our tests. And the results varied in interesting ways. Asian buyers were treated differently than their white counterparts 19% of the time, so 2 out of 10. Hispanic buyers were treated differently than their white counterparts 39% of the time, 4 out of 10. And Black buyers were treated differently than their white counterparts 49% of the time, 5 out of 10. Now, most of the attention has been on that high difference for Black customers, and that makes sense. But I'd say let's not lose sight of the rest. If 4 out of 10 Hispanic buyers in our tests or 2 out of 10 Asian buyers were treated poorly half a century after the civil rights laws were passed, then those seemed like high numbers as well. We viewed this as testing the gatekeepers in real estate to see how they perform. Only 2 of the 12 companies, 2 of the smallest regional brands, were the only ones to pass all of their tests. It's fair to say that most of these major national and regional real estate companies were contributing to the racial segregation in our suburbs. So the obvious question you have to ask yourself is, would the results be any different if we repeated the test this weekend in Hartford or Litchfield? If 4 retired teachers or 4 stockbrokers or 4 auto mechanics, 1 white, 1 black, 1 Hispanic, 1 Asian, go shopping in your communities this weekend for their families, will they go home on Monday receiving in their email the same listings? Will they be pre-qualified in the same way? And what assurance do you have in your brokerage that that would be the result? Let me talk about what differences we saw. First, we saw steering. Agents directed 1 out of 4 of our minority homebuyers into different communities, different school districts altogether than their white counterparts, 1 out of 4. We also saw differences in how buyers would be pre-qualified or screened. We saw minority buyers asked for ID when the white buyer was not. Some agents wouldn't help our Black or Hispanic buyer unless they signed an exclusive contract with that brokerage. But the brokerage didn't require a contract of the white buyer. And then there were inappropriate comments by agents. It's interesting. Minority buyers were not subjected to racial comments or inappropriate remarks about race or schools or crime. We're past the days of signs that say whites only. Things are more subtle now. It was the white buyers who heard the inappropriate comments about race, schools, crime, resale values. The same was not said to the minority buyers. Here's a little video clip which highlights this problem of inappropriate comments. It'll take me just a second to get that started for you. Here we go.
They came in,
Okay.
and they really took over Springs and Northwest Woods area.
Here, an agent gives conflicting advice about Freeport.
I like Freeport. Now you have a bad school district, and that's not good for resale value.
All the school bus, see the moms that are hanging out on the corners.
But you don't want to go there. It's a mixed neighborhood. It's mini United Nations.
Because you might be more comfortable in a certain demographic area that isn't heavily one way or another in terms of the people.
Bayshore has 2 school districts, Brentwood and Bayshore. You don't want to have Brentwood school districts. You want to have Bayshore school district.
I can't say anything, but I encourage you, I want you to go there at 10 o'clock at night with your wife to buy diapers. Go to that 7-Eleven. They didn't buy there.
No, that's great.
I have to say it without saying it. You have the knowledge of the areas.
Yes.
I don't want to use the word steer, but I try to I'll use another word.
Listen,
I educated
absolutely.
the areas.
That's...
Yeah. How are you, Russ?
Hey, Russ.
Good. How are you?
We're either waiting for the owner or waiting for the agent to show up.
You don't want to be. I don't think you should be in Elmont. I think you should probably just be Franklin Square.
And I remember specifically, he talked about steering.
Yes, that's what he said. Steering, yeah.
Yeah. And in the same breath, he mentioned, well, steering's bad, but this is what I'm going to do.
There's something called steering. No steering, you know, like steering.
Oh, like a car or something?
No,
Oh.
like a horse, even.
You know, it may be that some agents have gotten a message through the years that complying with the fair housing laws is some sort of political correctness, that it means not saying the wrong thing, or not saying the wrong thing to the wrong person who might be offended and complain about it. Our tests suggest that we need more attention to steering and to differential treatment on what agents do and not just what they say. What listings people are given. And are agents giving the same advice, the same listings to all clients? Are they treating all clients equally?
So Bill, we've been talking about steering. What forms did this unequal treatment take?
Well, it's, you know, I admit that steering is sort of an imprecise term, you know, that we use. And sometimes it's used as sort of a catch-all for various behaviors. Well, let's talk about that conduct. Telling one person that there is no housing in an area in their price range. You won't find anything for your money there. But showing housing in that price range to others, we saw that happen. Making unsolicited comments about the race or ethnicity or religion of people who live in an area, or comments about the schools, comments about crime or resale values, as a way of encouraging or usually discouraging someone from living there, that's steering, especially while giving contrary information to someone else or being silent on those matters with the other person. You saw an example of an agent telling the white buyer to avoid an area because of poor resale values. You don't have kids, but resale values are affected by schools. That's a bad school district, don't buy there. While telling the minority buyer, oh, you might like it there in Freeport. We also saw differences in just the level of service. Overall, our white testers got 50% more listings than their black counterparts. Now, we've been discussing this in terms of individual buyers, but look at it neighborhood by neighborhood for a moment. Both home buyers, both testers would ask for an area, let's say within half an hour of downtown. And that area, that circle, would include many communities and neighborhoods and schools. But sometimes in the wider residential parts of that circle, listings would be given only to our white buyers. Minorities were in effect steered around those communities. And that's what we were testing for. We also saw something else we weren't testing for. It surprised us. We had minority communities inside the circle. They're in the circle for both buyers. Homes are for sale in the price range for both buyers, but neither buyer gets those listings. These were the communities with more than a modest amount of Black population. The agents steered around those for everyone. Well, our legal experts said, wait, who has the lawsuit in that case? It's a long list. Not only are the white and minority homebuyers being steered illegally, both the white and minority homebuyers are being harmed by being steered around some communities. But the communities themselves are being harmed, the governments, and anyone who has tried to sell a home in those areas, and their listing brokers have a lawsuit under the Fair Housing Act against the brokers that are steering around their communities. And you know why. Fewer buyers means lower home values, lower prices, lower home equity, and less tax money for playgrounds, parks, libraries, and schools. Here's a video clip with a classic example of steering. It couldn't get any more straightforward than this. An agent tells one family, a man shopping for his wife and their teenager that an area would be a good place to live with the nicest neighbors. While the same agent warns another family, a man shopping for his wife and teenager, stay away, it's a dangerous place. It'll take just a moment to start this video clip for you. Here we go.
Kelvin Toon is a black man in his early 50s, and he went in to meet with an agent involving a test in the Brentwood community, a community that is 80% Hispanic and black. The agent communicated to Kelvin, our black tester, that she enjoyed meeting with clients from the Brentwood area.
Every time I get a new listing in Brentwood or a new client, I get so excited because they're the nicest people.
When we sent Kelvin's counterpart in to meet with the same agent, the white tester was actually warned about Brentwood not being a nice place.
The nursing home we need to be near is in Brentwood.
Okay.
And so we found a couple that are in
Those are all
Brentwood.
pretty close to each other.
Okay. And it just seemed like those would be handy also for going
Do you
to
want to
visit.
give me them and I'll look into them for you? Or?
Yeah, I can do that.
That warning came later to the white testers saying there was concern about gang activity going on in Brentwood. This agent wanted the white tester to know, but that information wasn't provided to Kelvin, the black tester. The listings centered black tester Kelvin in Brentwood with 27 house listings, while the white tester got 0 listings in Brentwood and was directed towards much whiter neighborhoods.
So, Bill, do you think the agents included in the documentary were knowingly steering, such that they shouldn't be saying what they're saying, or do you think some of it is unconscious bias?
No, Alexa, I think this is a very important question. There were agents who would say, I shouldn't be saying this, but, which I guess is the real estate equivalent of hold my beer. Something bad's about to happen. But I think it's important to start here. Under the law, it doesn't matter if it's being done intentionally or not. The Federal Fair Housing Act and your state and local laws cover behavior, not thoughts or motives. The law is not a mind reader. We do not ask burglars if they intend to be breaking into the house. If an agent is treating one person better than another similarly situated person, and the difference between them is one of the 7 categories in the Fair Housing Act, or the additional categories in your state law, the agent has violated the law. To remind you, in the federal law, the 7 categories are color, race, religion, national origin, disability, sex, and family status, which usually means having children or being pregnant. State and other laws may include marital status, sexual orientation, other categories. I do think it's interesting, though, to speculate about the motivations of the agents. If you want to stop something from happening, you have to consider why it may be happening. Some agents may, in effect, be profiling or assuming that the person of color can't really afford homes in the price range they've given, won't qualify for the mortgage, will be wasting their time, while accepting the same price range without question from a white buyer. One of the interesting things about profiling is how it doesn't work. We usually talk about profiling as though it's a shortcut to success. We have TV shows about FBI crime profilers, right? But let's look at another context. Let's say you want to stop school shootings, right? The profile you might have of who watches too many violent video games, plays violent video games, or dresses a certain way. These are not good predictors of who will be a school shooter. You understand the problem. The profile fits too many good kids. Lots of kids watch video games. And it may miss the kid who is planning an attack. What is a better predictor? Well, acquiring weapons, telling other students of plans, don't be in the cafeteria on Thursday. Or think of another context, airport safety and counterterrorism work. Religion is not a good way to identify who will be a terrorist. Experts in these fields say, for example, that you end up putting too many investigative resources into chasing every person of a certain religion. It's not a good use of your time. And you waste resources that you should be using looking for people whose behavior tells you that they're a terrorist. And in real estate, race is not a good way to identify which customers can afford a home. There's not a profile that fits the good real estate customer. To put it another way, you leave too much money on the table if you assume that people of color can't be good customers. Besides, it's illegal. So why might some agents do it? Some agents may think, consciously or not, that they'll make money faster with less effort if they sort of sort people. If as you heard one agent say, if we show you homes where you'll feel comfortable. But why assume that people want segregated neighborhoods? Besides, say it with me, it's illegal. Some agents may be bowing to a bias that they expect from others. Maybe an agent fears that the sellers may be upset if the agent brings a minority buyer to the home, or that the neighbors, who are of course potential customers, might be upset if the agent is seen to be integrating the area. Agents could think that appraisers or lenders may be biased. And there are recent studies about disparities in appraisal and in lending. That would make it harder to close a sale. Again, legally, none of that matters. The Fair Housing Act still stands. Steering is illegal. I guess it's possible that a few agents somewhere are prejudiced, acting out of some bias against minorities, but I assume that that is a tiny group, so small as to be irrelevant to our discussion. As others have said, there's just too much steering for it to be accounted for by outright prejudice. As one commentator said, the good people have to be doing it too. In general, on issues of race, it's pretty easy to burn up all the energy as heat on the question, who is the racist? Are they saying I'm a racist? Who's the bigot in our office? It might be more productive to use that energy as light on a sort of an engineering kind of question. How does it work in our office? Is our broker confident this week that an agent is giving two different customers the same listings? How does it work? How do we pre-qualify people? Do we have exceptions? Who gets those exceptions? Because under the law, it's what you do that counts. I do think it's interesting to consider the point of view of the home buyer. Even if, in our case, they were mostly actors testing the agents, our testers often came back from the real estate office to the newspaper office, telling us that agent was so nice, she was so helpful. They only learned the truth months later when our team brought the buyers together to watch videos and to look at the maps of where they'd been given listings. You'll meet some of the testers in this short video clip. And also you'll hear from a fair housing expert who works with them. Take me just a moment to get this going for you. Okay. Here we go.
It almost makes me wish that the racism is more explicit so that I would know about it.
Too often I hear people who maybe aren't as familiar with this kind of work say, oh, well, they were just testers. But all you have to do is tell someone, which I have to do on a fairly regular basis, that you were turned down because of your race, and tell them the circumstances that occurred on a particular test. And you will see just how real and painful that injury is.
Elmont, you know, it's okay, it's good, you're very close to the city. Some of them are not as nice, you know, Elmont.
I do remember him, he was nice, and I do remember him pointing out on the map.
Oh, he loved that map, I remember that.
Yeah, he had the map and he's like, you know.
Some of these towns, in my opinion, are not necessarily the greatest in terms of school districts, safety, you know, crime, resale.
You know, the agent with the map there, he looked like General Patton planning the invasion of Sicily, but he had a different invasion plan for each racial group. For the white buyer, the plan was don't get off the highway until you stay on the Southern State Parkway till you get past all these communities. That was one of the patterns that startled us, was when some agents would begin their presentations to the buyers. Remember, these were new customers they just met, with inappropriate comments or guidance that violates the fair housing laws. It didn't seem to be offhand casual comments, in other words. No one was cut off in traffic on a home tour and made some sort of slur against a driver of a different ethnicity. That wasn't what was happening on our test. It seemed to be the sales pitch. For some agents, the standard guidance for how to narrow your home search. I hate to say it, but for those agents, it seemed that steering was a big part of the service that they were selling.
Well, Bill, so now let's talk about what role did schools play in the actions of agents?
I suspect it's no different for you in the Hartford area. Over and over, we heard agents explain to our buyers, everything is by schools, everything's divided by schools, decided by schools. Agents would tout one district over another. Some districts were blue ribbon and others were declining. Often they gave different information to different buyers. Let's step back for a moment. America's school districts are so segregated by race in many communities that directing someone to a certain school is the same as directing them to an area with higher or lower minority population, whether race is mentioned or not. America's schools are more segregated now than they were 30 years ago. More segregated now than when I graduated from high school, this gray-haired Jennifer. And school segregation and housing segregation are intertwined because we have school districts. Now, some agents have picked up the idea, well, I can't talk about schools at all. You may have heard agents say, oh, I can't mention schools. I can't answer any questions about schools. But that's not the law. The Fair Housing Act doesn't say that. Our legal experts say very clearly that agents can give straightforward, factual information. Agents can answer questions. Agents can refer customers to websites with information. The problem arises when the agents are picking and choosing different districts for different customers, or making comments about schools and school quality, or about demographics in schools to steer customers toward or away from certain schools. Now we'll dig into this more, but first, here's a discussion of schools from our video. And you'll meet our law professor from the University of Kentucky, an advisor on our project. Let me play that for you here. Just a moment.
I said, do you really want your future children going to Amityville School District?
We're going to try and stay away from Freeport, Roosevelt, Hempstead for now because of the school district.
This part, the Salisbury part, is in demand because the schools are much better.
In Newsday's 86-pair tests, agents often applied a laser-like focus on school districts, highlighting their perceived quality when recommending places that house hunters should consider buying or avoid. Fair housing experts say touting or disparaging school districts can put agents in jeopardy because talking about school districts can be taken as a euphemism for race.
There's a few districts that I know I would I won't look in those towns.
Oh, okay.
You know, like Freeport and Baldwin and Amityville, which is part of Massapequa schools, but it's just certain parts of Massapequa.
If the customer asked about the quality of the schools and the agent responded with accurate information, I think the agent would be fine. The problem with talking about differentials in schools is that at least in the last 10 or 15 years, that has been a proxy for race. They don't mention the race of the community. Good schools are available in these areas. Those areas I'd stay away from because they have poor schools. I want to ask, did you tell that to the other tester? If you're only giving that information to one tester of the two, and the only difference is the race, then you've provided what I call differential service.
If you're in Massapequa, you only want school district 23.
Okay.
You don't want 6 in Massapequa because that takes in Amityville, and you're not going to like those schools.
It was striking how clear a map of school districts many of the agents had in their minds. That agent there, the last agent you saw, she was making a list for each customer of which school districts to consider, and helpfully sent the 2 testers from the real estate office back to the Newsday newspaper office with different lists. Schools are the hardest part of this, so let's take this one step further. We've talked about what's legal. Let's talk for a moment about what's right. How do you discuss school quality without violating the Fair Housing Act? We all understand that you don't have to talk about race to be steering. We all understand that if the districts vary in race, as districts do, and if you're promoting one over another, you're steering, especially if you're giving different information to a different buyer, or giving information to one buyer that you're silent on with the other. Some companies do suggest that agents not talk about schools. Other companies suggest that agents limit their information to answering factual questions. Graduation rates, that's a factual question. Who won the lacrosse championship? But stay away from the trap of using or replying to vague labels such as good or nice or high-performing schools. The same schools are not good for everybody. Some people want the music program. Now, here's the complicated part. If it's okay to share websites with objective information, as the professor says, is it okay to talk about school test scores? School test scores are often used by the public and by real estate agents as an indicator, usually the indicator, of school quality. Write this on the blackboard 100 times. School test scores don't tell you how good a school is. School test scores tell you mostly how wealthy and educated are the parents who send their kids to that school. 20 years ago, before I lived in Connecticut, I did a study for the Associated Press, and we took school test scores and we took the demographics of all the towns in Connecticut. And then, as now, wealth and education of the parents is a very good predictor of their children's test scores. And in America, race is a very good predictor of the wealth and education of the parents. So you see the problem. A high performing school, a blue ribbon school, may just be a wealthier area. And a school with lower test scores might actually be the higher performing one. Their good teachers may be bringing up the scores of students who are growing up in working class households or have fewer advantages. Word about this is getting around. Just recently, greatschools.org, the school ranking website that so many agents refer customers to, has realized this problem. It's changed its ratings, especially in states, most states, where it was basing the ratings entirely on test scores. It said, wait a minute, that's just perpetuating segregation, perpetuating the myth that that school's better because it has higher test scores. NAR has spoken up in favor of this change. Now, you want a bottom line. Can you talk about school test scores? Can you refer parents to websites listing them? Yes, legally you can, if you give the same information to everybody. But you might ask yourself if it's right to do this in a country as segregated as ours. That's a moral question, not a legal one. NAR is making a film that will come out later this year and is trying to get you, NAR says we know that schools are the area that's changing the fastest in terms of guidance for agents. And it's trying to give you better guidance about what you can say about schools.
Excellent, Bill. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing that film that NAR is coming out with, that's for sure. So that being said, what was the reaction from the real estate industry and the government?
Well, I guess it's fair to say that we've raised some awareness of these issues. Let me address with you some of the fixes that have been proposed. But first, what happened to the agents in the videos, I'm often asked. We know that New York State is having disciplinary hearings for the agents and the brokers. We'll see if anyone loses a license. There was one agent who gave up her license rather than go through the disciplinary process. We did see the agents and the brokers called to testify in public before a state Senate committee hearing. They were sworn in. And you know, it's almost 100 agents and brokers who are in danger of losing their licenses because it's about 30 some agents who flunk their tests and then they're brokers. And often there's more than one broker of record. So you get almost 100 people. They were sworn in and were asked questions. Some got sort of a public thrashing from the senators. The agent you saw who said, follow the school bus and see what mothers are waiting to meet the bus. She said, I just meant for the customers to know where the bus routes were. And the agent who said the Hispanics are taking over the neighborhood, he said, I meant that in a positive way. The most surprising part of the hearing in New York was that the brokers all said that they had reviewed the videos and the maps and found that nobody did anything wrong. Their position seemed to be that if race wasn't mentioned, if steering wasn't announced, if agents didn't say, I'm now going to violate the law, then it wasn't illegal. And you know better, and the senators knew better. After the hearing, the New York State Senate unanimously approved changes to state laws. And we'll see if those go anywhere in the state assembly. But let me just describe for you very quickly what those changes are that have been proposed and unanimously passed the New York Senate, because changes in state laws tend to creep from state to state. First, more testing, and not done by the agency that normally regulates real estate agents, but testing by the state attorney general's office. Because the senators realize that testing is the only way to know if people are treated equally. Who pays for that testing? The real estate industry. $30 onto a broker's fee every 2 years, $10 on a salesperson's fee every 2 years to pay for the testing. requiring the same procedure. An office has to have a procedure that it uses for everyone to take in new clients and to pre-qualify them. More and better training on implicit bias, the legacy of segregation, and the fair housing laws. Damages available to victims of discrimination, and doubling the fine from the state on licensees who break the discrimination laws. Where does that money go from the fines? You get one guess: to pay for more testing. Now, we'll see if these changes actually happen in New York and if they spread. But if you want to stop speeding, you'll add enforcement. At the federal level, HUD has already begun to, I guess it's fair to say, resume enforcement of the Fair Housing Act under the new president and the new HUD secretary. So we'll see what happens at the federal level. Let me address some of the fixes that have been proposed by NAR. The National Association of Realtors has responded vigorously to the Newsday investigation, and I think its efforts are interesting. NAR has a new program, it's called ACT, A-C-T. A for accountability, C for culture change, T for training. Let's just take those for a moment each. Under accountability, NAR has been working with your state associations to point out where state licensing laws fail to support fair housing. That's a new thing, a national trade group making recommendations to its state groups to toughen state laws on fair housing regulation enforcement. Also, NAR has developed a voluntary program of self-testing. That is, brands or brokerages could opt in to having their agents tested. NAR is, in effect, helping companies that want to do that testing. And you would think perhaps there wouldn't be any such companies. The CEO of Realogy, which you know is the biggest real estate brand in America, that owns Century 21 and Coldwell Banker and Sotheby's International and others, said, yes, we should be testing our own agents. And NAR said, we'll meet you halfway. In Buffalo, New York, the association has a grant and is going to be testing brokers in Buffalo. Washington State, Delaware State, others are starting testing programs to test their agents. Now that's opt-in, voluntary testing. It won't be public. You won't see it on YouTube, but still, that's a measure of accountability. ACT, culture change. You know that fair housing is a core component of the Realtor Code of Ethics. Not just in April. You may not be old enough to remember that for 50 years, that same code of ethics prohibited selling a home in a white neighborhood to a person of color. So let's agree that cultures can be changed and that change can take a long time. There is a long tradition in America of actions that were legal at the time. I was told that your book club has been reading The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein, a wonderful book that describes this long tradition of redlining, of blockbusting, of racial covenants on deeds that restrict who you could sell to, of predatory subprime lending that strips home equity out of minority neighborhoods, of placement of highways that destroyed Black neighborhoods. The professor and others are not saying that real estate agents created segregation, but describing how financing available only to the white GIs coming back after World War II and other government mechanisms helped perpetuate segregation. So they're not just historical facts. Even this year, we've seen studies on differences in appraisals. And let's agree also that the effects of segregation carry down from generation to generation, starting with the differences in wealth creation. We all know that home equity is the money that the grandkids use to pay for college and buy homes. So accountability, culture change, training. New York has new classes. Our team shared the curriculum with experts who found it was very jokey, hardly mentioned steering at all. New York has rewritten its curriculum. But I want to mention a couple of things on the federal level. NAR is rolling out a course this year on implicit bias in real estate, how to recognize it and overcome it. NAR has shared materials on implicit bias in the past, but they were sort of generic. This is about real estate. It's a 3-hour course for brokers. And the idea is that brokers can then teach the course or lead a discussion with their agents. And many of you have tried Fairhaven. I know that many associations have had competitions and tried to get everybody to take Fairhaven, which is a sort of a game or simulation that came out last fall from NAR. It's very well done. It takes about an hour to go through it, and you're taking the role of an agent trying to close deals, or you might be the customer. So it's really trying to teach not only the law, but empathy. So I encourage everybody to try it. It's at fairhaven.realtor. Finally, NAR is making a film about good role models. After all, 2 of the 12 companies in our tests passed all their tests. Let me just add a layman's perspective on this, which I'll close with. Often during our project, we were like air traffic controllers, sending the testers out and then watching the videos when they came back. And we would discuss, well, how hard would it be to stop steering if we, lay people, were running a real estate office? Well, we all understand that it's not a fix to say, we respond if anyone complains. We all understand that no one would know they're being steered because no one knows what listings are given to another customer. No one would complain. It did seem clear in our tests that the agents, the brokerages did not have a rigorous standard for what they do and don't do with every customer. A checklist. We would see one customer come back from an agent with a thick folder and the other with a skinny folder. That seems like something you can fix. You could argue that it would help to diversify the real estate workforce, to have more minority agents and brokers, and that would have many benefits. But let's not think of that as a cure-all for steering. We saw steering and discrimination by agents of all backgrounds. We just were getting whatever agents were working the same as a customer would, and it was a diverse group. And we saw discrimination by people of many backgrounds, just as you can see police brutality, for example, by some minority officers. The Minneapolis case is certainly a strong one there. And that's why people talk about a systemic problem. It did seem clear that many agents in our tests were unfamiliar with the minority neighborhoods. After my stories in Atlanta about the banks, one of the banks put its lenders on a bus and gave them a tour of a new subdivision, beautiful homes being built that clearly from its location would be a Black subdivision, that the agents never knew there were nice houses in that part of town. Maybe a bus tour for agents and brokers is not a bad idea to get past some stereotypes. We did notice that the large real estate brands had more than 200 branch offices on Long Island, but not a single one was in those communities where the majority of Black residents lived. And they didn't represent many sellers in those areas either. I have to wonder about the role of brokers in your office. Do brokers make an effort to know whether steering is happening in their offices? Do the brokers check after a customer visits, after a customer has been helped, to see what listings the customer was given, which neighborhoods or schools they were given, and what other areas might have matched up with the customer's actual criteria? Our customers, our testers, would meet with the agent for 20 minutes or so, and then the agent would turn to the computer screen and start to click to generate listings, right? In the MLS or in their proprietary software. That's the moment, if you think about it, where steering is happening, which means the information's in the MLS and will end up in court one day. Brokers, do you demand reports from your MLS that tell you which schools and communities your agents are choosing and which ones they're not, so you can go ask why? Do you have consistent ways of qualifying customers? It is perfectly okay to require pre-approval from every buyer. And it is perfectly okay to require pre-approval from no buyers. You don't want to waste your time, or you figure, well, they'll become educated buyers and we'll be their agent. And that's how we're going to get in new customers. Either one of those is fine. But if you have a standard and you let it be relaxed for one person and not for another, that's where the broker is going to be in Hartford defending the license. Let me give a last word on this to our law professor from Kentucky, Professor Schwinn. This just takes just a minute. If I can hit the right buttons, just a moment. All right, here we go. Very brief clip here.
I'm a law professor at the University of Kentucky, and I've been a law professor for a long number of years. All we're asking in these tests, you get two people who come in and ask for exactly the same thing. Why don't you give them the same listing? Why don't you pre-qualify them in exactly the same way? It's not that big a burden. This is a law. This should be treated like a tax law or any other law. You have to obey this law, and particularly if you're in a licensed business like real estate agents, if you can't obey the law, you ought to just get out.
Now that's where I'll leave it with you. You know, I think the hard part is that you all want to obey the law, but we may not be thinking of how can some differences creep in our office. You know, NAR offers two simple, straightforward suggestions for how to avoid steering. Listen to these closely. One is give people listings based on their objective criteria: home size, corner lot, number of bedrooms, not on vague terms such as nice neighborhood or good schools or safe. NAR says keep in mind that real estate agents are not experts in schools. Second, pay attention to unconscious bias. Ask yourself, why did I eliminate certain areas? Well, I'm a layman, but I have to ask, those two seem like good pieces of advice, but aren't they somewhat contradictory? If you give people only the listings that meet their objective criteria, when you give me more criteria, you'll get fewer listings. Then why would you be eliminating communities at all? So that's my layman's question for you, is why should real estate agents be picking and choosing communities? If we gave every customer access to all the listings in their price range with the right number of bedrooms, the best way to stop illegal steering may be to stop steering customers at all. I know that you all want to make sure everybody's treated fairly. I hope you will share our film, our project with everyone in your office, with your customers. It's simply at newsday.com/divided. But don't stop with having a movie night. Have a conversation. How does it work in our office? How do we know everybody's treated equally? How do we check on that? What specific steps can we take to make sure that that happens? And even, I think there's a lot of promise in having people take the Fairhaven game, play that, because that role playing can be very helpful for learning. And I think even having a session where you pass the mic around and the customer keeps asking about schools and we pass the mic around and practice our answers and have your lawyer there to guide you. I think that kind of role playing also may be really useful. Thank you for inviting me to meet with you, and I hope you have some additional questions.
Yes, Bill. And before we turn it over to Holly, that's been moderating the chat, I just want to thank you again so very much for your time, not only today, but the effort you put into your career. You really are affecting change, right? Like what you've been able to do, this journey that you've taken us on here, it doesn't end here, right? And I wanted to share a few things with you before we bring Holly back on here. But one of our core values at NAR is leading change. So we at GHAR are following the 2021 NAR President Charlie Opler's Stand Up for Racial Equity Challenge. We brought it to our association as well. And so we actually are challenging all of our members to take 4 components. The first, the NAR's Fair Haven, which you mentioned, which is the Fair Housing Simulation Program. Very informative, very well put together. I've done that myself. In addition, NAR's bias training video, which I know you mentioned as well, and the At Home with Diversity certification class. And on top of that, our 4th element that we're challenging all of our members to partake in is the mandatory CE, Understanding and Preventing Bias in Real Estate, which is specific to Connecticut. So that being said, I just want to remind all of our members of this challenge, because I know you touched upon some of those resources as being really great places for people to go. But again, anyone that's listening here, please check out the 40-minute film, not only with yourself, but everyone in your office, share it on Facebook, and let this be a place for you to start discussions, right? This is a place that can start the tough conversations. And just know that we are here creating a safe space for everyone to contribute and to ask questions and to learn and grow. And Bill, you have created the space for many people, right? You've allowed this to become a center where maybe people did not realize this was as much of an issue as it is. I remember when this came out, I was like, oh my goodness, I was in disbelief that this is actually what's happening out there. So just a wholehearted thank you. Thank you so very much. With that, I want to turn it over to Holly Callanan, our CEO, to go over any of the questions that we have.
Okay, hi guys. We actually don't have any questions in the Q&A. I just wanted to follow up when this did come out, when it was announced and it came out in the news. We were actually I think just at the tail end of a conference, an NAR annual conference, and we were just about to have the board of directors meeting. I think it was like the next day, and it hit like wildfire, and it was a really eye-opening moment, because people were sort of shocked and couldn't believe it. And it was a little bit of rumor and people wanting to figure out what exactly had happened and what was this all about. So it caused such a big interest and big curiosity that, it's taken us 2 years, but I'm glad to have you here, Bill, today to let us know about it and tell us kind of exactly what went down.
I think a lot of people's reaction, let me just sort of encourage 2 sides of the same coin, but a lot of people's reaction has been, I can't believe the agent said those things. I sure hope nobody I know would say anything like that. But I think because of some of what's said is so outrageous, it gets all the attention. And there probably needs to be more attention on every time we email out listings or check those boxes to start generating listings for someone. There can be a journalist or a state investigator making a map of those listings and laying them over census data and comparing them with the listings that your fellow agent is giving or that you've given to some other customer. And probably not enough attention on those. I do think that there's been an increasing attention, just sort of coincidentally, on, for example, in this tight market, the issue of buyer love letters, these pick me letters. I talked to a buyer this past week who was just telling me straightforwardly how she'd done the right thing. She'd picked the biggest offer, the most money. That's the offer she took. She didn't do anything wrong. But she was telling me her story of her home sale began with, oh yeah, I'm in Plainview on Long Island, and the first 15 offers we got 20 offers. The first 15 offers were Asian families, she said, and the next 5 offers were Jewish families. And we chose someone because it was the highest offer who'd just grown up around the corner from us. Now, word about this is getting around, but she shouldn't have any of that information, right? A good agent would have given her a spreadsheet, and she wouldn't have the names, and she wouldn't know who's Asian and who's Jewish and who grew up around the corner and who has a family like hers, because it's impossible to look at those letters and not disclose in the letter marital status, religion, sex, color, nationality, it's all in the letter, right? So it's when one of her neighbors talks to, who she tells about her process, talks to someone who didn't get the home and passes on this information that she chose the person who grew up around the neighborhood, it's the agent who's going to end up with the fair housing lawsuit. Even if the person chose, in this case, the right buyer for the right reason. But NAR and others are trying to get word out about these buyer letters. And I'm sure many of you know, journalists are often on the wrong side of this. The Wall Street Journal had a story recently encouraging buyers, make sure you write those letters. So buyers are getting the wrong message and maybe not enough of the right message. So I think this is a process where it requires constant education. And of course, you're battling generations of, the agent with the map, he's a second generation realtor. He may just be doing what his parents did, you see? And so I think it's one of the keys is to keep in mind the harms that are done by segregation. People think of this just in terms of a law violation problem, but I think it's important to keep in mind the harms that are done. I'll close with this. We saw recently that Walter Mondale died, and we remember him as a former vice president and presidential candidate, but he was a senator and he wrote the fair housing law. And he told Newsday and others, it's the law we never enforced. Well, he's gone. It's been 53 years since he wrote that law, and it's still not really being enforced or followed. And so it sort of goes cyclically with different presidential administrations and that sort of thing. And occasionally a journalist will come along and say, hey, that's still happening. But so we get these waves of reaction, always dealing with issues that we sort of thought of as things from the past. So I'm hoping that people will sort of keep their eye on the idea that segregation causes harms. The fair housing law was intended to break that cycle. And that's why playing by the rules is really important.
Thanks, Bill. I just want to make sure I have it down. The place where we can see the entire video, it's www.newsday.
You've shared the link. Newsday.com/divided takes you to the stories. And about one page down on the stories, or 2 pages, there's a video window, and it has the 40-minute film there. So the whole thing, it's not, you don't have to subscribe. It's not behind the paywall at Newsday. It's just newsday.com/divided takes you to the whole project and all the stories and the full video, which you can enlarge on your screen and play at your local drive-in theater.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Bill. A reminder to everyone here, this was recorded today, so we'll make it accessible for all of you in case you want to watch it again or have some colleagues, people in your office watch it. I encourage you really to share it. We will make sure that you know where we have it, that you can use it and show it and share it.
Perfect. Bill,
thank you, Molly. Thank you, Alexa. I really appreciate it.
This has been such an honor. I'm so thankful for you to spend time with us and just really appreciate all that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.